They thought the fire was his escape. They were wrong. The fire was only the door. Because the moment the shipyard burned, he disappeared into the Blackwater swamp, and every man sent in after him either came back broken or did not come back at all. In the summer of 1859, along the southern coast of Brazil, there stood a timber yard built at the edge of a Blackwater mangrove, a place where enslaved men cut cypress and mangrove wood, shaped beams in suffocating heat, and built boats they would never set foot on. The air there never felt clean. It carried salt, rot, smoke, and the slow, constant hum of insects that never slept. Among the workers, there was a man the overseers called Mateo, not because it was his name, but because it was easier for them to say. Mateo did not speak much. He did not fight. He did not draw attention. And that was why they underestimated him. Because while the others survived day by day, Mateo was studying everything. The rhythm of the guards, the moments when the lanterns dimmed, the hours when the tide crept in and pulled back. He noticed which beams were dry enough to burn fast, which barrels held tar, and which ones leaked just enough to catch. He learned where the ground stayed solid, and where it gave way, without warning. Most of all, he learned the swamp, not as a place to fear, but as a system, a living map, that shifted, but never lied. Years passed like that, not wasted, but stored. Because Mateo understood something no one else did. You do not escape a place like that by running blindly. You escape by deciding exactly when everything must fall apart. The night came without warning. No wind, no moon, only heat and silence. The kind of silence that makes even breathing feel loud. In the main house, the masters were drinking, laughing, celebrating another shipment finished. Confident, careless. Mateo moved when the noise was loudest. Not fast, not panicked. Precise. He slipped into the storage sheds, where timber was stacked high, dry, waiting. Where tar barrels sat in rows, thick, heavy, flammable. Where fire would not stay small. He paused only once, just long enough to look at the beams, at the place that had taken years of his life. Then, he struck the spark. At first, nothing. A faint glow, a fragile flicker. Then the tar caught, and the fire breathed. It spread along the wood, climbed the beams, jumped from barrel to barrel. And suddenly, it was no longer a flame. It was a wall. The shipyard erupted. Wood cracked. Tar exploded. Flames tore through the structure faster than any man could run. Shouts filled the night. Orders. Confusion. Panic. Men rushed toward the fire, trying to save what could not be saved. Trying to understand what had already been decided. But Mateo was already gone. He did not run toward the road. He did not run toward open land. He ran toward the mangrove. Toward black water. Twisted roots, and ground that could swallow a man whole. Because he knew something they did not. The fire behind him was not his escape. It was his shield. And ahead. The swamp was waiting. Silent, endless, and far more dangerous. For anyone who did not belong to it. The swamp did not welcome him. It tested him. The first step off solid ground felt like stepping into something alive. The mud shifted under his weight. Water rose around his ankles. And the roots twisted in every direction, like something trying to hold him in place. Mateo did not hesitate. He moved slowly, carefully, because in a place like that, speed was how you died. Behind him, the fire still roared, but already, the swamp was swallowing the sound. Ahead, there was no path, only water, shadow, and breathless silence. He waded deeper, until the ground disappeared entirely. Now it was water to his knees, then his waist. Black water, so dark, it reflected nothing. Mateo lowered himself further, letting the water take his scent, letting it erase him, because he knew the dogs would come first. And they did. By dawn, the hunters had arrived. Men on horseback, voices sharp with anger, dogs straining at their chains. They followed the burn, the destruction, and then, the edge of the swamp, where Mateo had vanished. The dogs barked, pulled forward, eager, then slowed, then stopped, confused, because the scent ended, right at the water. Mateo was already watching them, half submerged, hidden between roots, breathing slow, through the space between branches. He did not move, not even when the insects bit, not even when something brushed past his leg beneath the water. Because survival was not about comfort, it was about stillness. The hunters argued at the edge. Some wanted to go in, others refused. They knew the stories. Men who entered mangrove swamps and never found their way back. But anger is louder than fear, and anger won. They stepped into the water. That was their first mistake. Mateo did not run. He moved deeper, but not away. He began to circle, because now, he was no longer escaping. He was choosing ground, choosing where they would lose themselves. The swamp shifted with the tide. Channels opened, then disappeared. Roots that looked solid collapsed under weight. Patches of calm water hid soft mud beneath. Mateo knew these places. He marked them in his mind. Days, weeks, months ago, while cutting timber, while pretending not to see. Now, he used them. He stepped only where he trusted the ground. He broke reeds in patterns, just enough to be followed. He let his trail appear, then vanish, then appear again, always leading forward, but never leading out. The hunters followed, boots sinking, cursing, pushing deeper than they should. The dogs struggled. Water ruined the scent. Mud slowed their steps. And the swamp closed around them. By midday, they had lost direction. Trees looked the same. Water looked the same. Every step felt like the last. And somewhere, just out of sight, Mateo watched, not with fear, but with patience, because now, he understood something the hunters did not. This was no longer a chase. This was time. And the longer they stayed, the weaker they became. The more the swamp would take from them. Hunger, direction, strength, and eventually, their way back. Mateo moved again, silent, measured, deeper into the black water, not to escape, but to disappear completely. And behind him, the swamp began to keep what had entered it. By the second day, the hunters were no longer a group. They were fragments, men separated by water, by roots, by fear they refused to name. Voices carried strangely in the swamp, sometimes too far, sometimes not at all. A man could shout and hear nothing back, or worse, hear something that wasn't an answer. Mateo had stopped thinking of them as pursuers. Now, they were movement, noise, disruption, things to be guided. He no longer walked in straight lines. He moved in arcs, slow circles, always staying just beyond sight, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. Because confusion was stronger than distance. The first man went under before noon, a heavy step, a patch of ground that looked solid. Then a crack, and a sudden drop. The water swallowed him to the chest, then the neck. He clawed at the roots, mud slipping through his fingers, screaming. The others rushed toward the sound, but every step they took dragged them deeper into the same soft ground. By the time they reached him,
there was nothing left to grab, only ripples, and silence. Mateo did not watch the end. He had already moved. Because the swamp did not need witnesses, it only needed time. That afternoon, the dogs stopped working, their bodies low, ears flat. Refusing to move forward, they whined, pulled backward, as if something ahead was not meant to be followed. The men beat them, dragged them, forced them forward, but scent meant nothing there. Water erased it, mud twisted it, heat dissolved it. The dogs began to fail, and without them, the men were blind. Mateo knew this would happen. He had waited for it, because a hunter without direction is just another man, lost in the dark. And the swamp favored the quiet ones. That night, rain came, not a storm, a slow, steady fall, that blurred edges, softened sound, turned everything into the same gray shadow. The men tried to make fire, the wood was too wet, the air too heavy. Every attempt died, before it could catch. They huddled together, hungry, cold, listening. And that was when they began to hear it. Movement, not loud, not clear, but close enough. Branches shifting, water touching roots, something, moving when they moved, stopping when they stopped. Mateo never revealed himself. He did not need to. Presence was enough. He let them feel watched, because fear did more work than any weapon. One of them fired into the dark. The sound shattered the silence, echoed, and then,
nothing. No reply. No target. Just the realization that they had wasted one more shot. By morning, they were weaker, voices hoarse, steps slower, eyes searching for direction that no longer existed. And still, they followed, because turning back would mean admitting they had already lost the path. Mateo guided them deeper, not with force, but with suggestion. A broken branch, a disturbed patch of water, a glimpse of movement, always just enough to keep them moving forward. He understood something now, something the swamp had taught him. You do not need to defeat your enemy. You only need to let the place finish what it has already begun. And the swamp never rushed. It took, slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but water and memory of men who thought they were hunting, until they realized, too late, they had been led exactly where they were meant to go. By the third day, there were fewer voices, fewer footsteps. The swamp had already taken what it wanted, and the rest were beginning to understand. They were no longer in control. Mateo did not follow them anymore. He moved ahead, because there was something deeper in the mangrove. Something the hunters would never see, unless they were led there. The water changed first. Less stagnant. Moving, slowly, with the tide. Then the trees shifted. Roots grew tighter. Denser. Creating walls, corridors, paths that did not exist unless you knew where to look. Mateo slipped between them, without sound, because this part of the swamp was not wild. It was hidden. He reached it near dusk. A rise of land barely visible above the waterline, dry enough to stand on, guarded by nothing, and everything. At first glance, it looked abandoned. No fire, no structures, no movement. But Mateo stopped. He waited, because he knew better. No place like this stayed unclaimed, not in a swamp like this. A sound came from behind him, soft, controlled. A footstep, then another. Figures emerged from the trees, silent, watching. Not hunters. Survivors. Men and women, thin, hardened, eyes sharp from years of never being safe. They held no uniforms, no signs of ownership, only tools. Blades, makeshift weapons, and knowledge.
One of them stepped forward, older, scar across his cheek, eyes that did not trust easily. "You led them here," his voice low, measured, not a question. Matteo did not deny it. He simply nodded. "They won't find this place," he said. The man studied him, long enough for silence to grow heavy. Then he asked the only question that mattered, "Or they will, because of you." Matteo held his gaze. "If they live long enough to understand where they are, then I made a mistake." The man watched him, then, slowly, he nodded. Because he understood. This was not a man running, this was a man choosing outcomes. They let him in, not as one of them, not yet, but as something useful, that night. For the first time since the fire, Matteo stood on dry ground, real ground. There was food, fish, roasted low, without smoke, roots, cleaned and shared. No one spoke loudly, no one wasted movement, because even here, safety was temporary. Matteo listened, and learned, this was not just a hiding place, it was a settlement. A place built by those who had escaped,
survived long enough to stay free. They knew the patrol patterns. They knew which plantations sent hunters, and which ones did not bother. They knew how to move people, quietly, through water, through trees. They had been doing it for years. But they had one weakness. They reacted. They survived. But they did not control. Matteo saw it immediately. And they saw that he saw it. Over the next days, he spoke little. But he showed them things. How to read the tide. Not just follow it. How to break trails. Without leaving signs. How to lead men into bad ground. Without being seen. And slowly, the way they looked at him changed. Not just another runaway. Not just another mouth to feed. But something else. Something dangerous. Useful. A man who did not just survive the swamp, but understood it. Then the scouts returned, breathing hard, voices tight. They're coming back. More of them. Better armed. And this time, they're not guessing. Silence settled over the camp. Because everyone understood. This would not be like before. This would not be confusion. This would be a hunt. Organized. Deliberate. Relentless. Matteo looked toward the water. Toward the direction the hunters would come from. And for the first time, he did not think about escape. He thought about preparation. Because now, the swamp was no longer just his refuge. It was theirs. And if the hunters were coming deeper, then this time, they would not just get lost. They would be expected. They came at dawn, not like before. No shouting, no chaos. This time, they moved carefully. Boats instead of horses. Lanterns shielded. Voices low. Men who had learned, at least enough, to be dangerous. They thought caution would save them. They thought preparation would change the outcome. But they did not understand. They were still stepping into a place that did not belong to them. Matteo was already awake. He had not slept. None of them had. The settlement moved in silence. Children hidden first. Elders guided deeper. Paths opened, then closed behind them. Nothing left in place that could be easily found. Because survival was not standing your ground. It was deciding what ground mattered, and what did not. The hunters entered the outer water at first light. They spread out, trying to cover more ground, trying to avoid the mistakes of the others. But even now, they were guessing, and Matteo knew it. He moved through the mangrove like something that had always been there, not rushing, not hesitating, just present. He did not attack, he adjusted. A path opened here, a safe route, just wide enough to follow, too easy, another closed behind them. Water rising with the tide, cutting off her turn, branches shifted, reeds bent, small signs, enough to guide them forward, never enough to warn them. One boat ran aground, men stepped out, the mud took their weight, slowly,
then all at once. A man fell, pulled knee-deep, then deeper. The others tried to pull him free, but every movement made it worse. The swamp did not rush, it did not need to. Another group pushed too far inland, following what looked like solid ground, until the roots thinned, and the earth beneath them gave way. Water closed over boots, then legs, then everything. Shouts echoed, then faded, as if the swamp itself had decided the noise was no longer needed. Mateo watched, not with anger, not with triumph, just with understanding. Because this was not revenge, this was balance. They had entered a place they did not respect, and the place answered. By the second night, the hunters were no longer hunting, they were trying to leave, but the paths they thought they knew were gone. Water had shifted, markers meant nothing, and fear made them choose wrong, again, and again, until there were fewer of them, and then, almost none.
Mateo did not follow the last of them. He did not need to, because the swamp would finish what remained. Instead, he turned back, toward the hidden ground, toward the people waiting, toward something new. Days passed, then weeks, and the settlement changed. Paths became systems. Lookouts became patterns. Silence became strategy. They no longer just hid. They prepared. They learned. They watched. Because now, they understood what Mateo had known all along. The swamp was not just protection. It was power. Far away, on the coast, the remains of the burned shipyard stood black and empty. No one rebuilt it. No one wanted to. Because the story had spread. Not in words, but in absence. Men who went in and did not come back. Some said the swamp was cursed. Others said it was haunted. But the truth was simpler. There were people inside it. People who had learned how not to be owned. And a man who had once built boats for others had instead built something else entirely. A place no master could ever cross.